The Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Melissa S., Pib Extra, Ryan K., Matt aka Stormageddon, Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Stephen P., Gilmer, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, YRP for life. Maybe I'll do an alternate take just in case. YRP for life. None of it sounds good. Fuck it. Who cares? Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, we are back here to talk Final Fantasy a couple weeks after the Final Fantasy Fantasy Draft, but this one is on a specific game, on a solo game. We are talking Final Fantasy X-2, which was voted on by you patrons, by you wonderful patrons over on the Still Loading podcast Patreon, so thank you all so much for voting for this. I appreciate that you, one, that you support me over there, and two, that you took the time to vote. So I'm excited to talk about this. And joining me to discuss the first sequel in the Final Fantasy series, the first direct sequel, I should clarify, is my good old buddy Rick from Pixel Project Radio. Rick, how are you doing today?
Hey, man. Thanks. I am glad to be here. I'm doing well. Really looking forward to talking about this game, X-2. It is, and I say this with no exaggeration and no irony, in my personal top 3 favorite Final Fantasy games, which I suspect is a reason that I wasn't invited to the Final Fantasy draft. I mean, what else?
No, you are long overdue to be part of the draft. I need to get you in at least sometime soon, in either next year or the year after, or something like that. You are long overdue for it, because trust me, there are some wild takes in the Final Fantasy draft. I look no further than Aiden Mower, like 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe it was 2 years. I think it was like 2 years ago. His number one overall pick for it was Zell from Final Fantasy VIII. So
fascinating.
I don't think you can go wrong with drafting anything with X-2 related.
Jokes aside, I do love X-2. I'm not proclaiming that it's the best game. I'm not proclaiming that it's better than anything else. But if I'm thinking about Final Fantasy games overall that I like the most, that I can just always sit down and play, that I have a special fondness for, X-2 easily cracks the top 3. Along with 9, and I don't know, I would have to think about the other one. But I genuinely love this game. I have since I was a kid, and I'm really glad that it's gotten a sort of reevaluation over the years, you know. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're going to get into the history and like early criticisms or whatever, but people are more fond of it these days, and or maybe I should say people are less needlessly critical. I think that's a better way of saying it.
I feel like that has that's a tendency to happen in most gaming circles now, where if there's a game that's like people are bashing upon its initial release, years later a lot of people like kind of soften on it, be like, oh, you know, it wasn't so bad actually. Like your perspective changes, you're at a different stage in your life, you're also like not so close to something. You know, I always think of like Metal Gear Solid 2, how people hated that when it first came out because, you know, you play spoiler alert for anyone who has not played Metal Gear Solid 2, but
which is me.
Okay, well, I mean, you know,
I know.
You know who you play as in that most of that game, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't spoil for you. You don't play as Solid Snake for most of that game, and now people look back on the game much more fondly. But at the time, there was a lot of vitriol with it. And I feel like X-2 kind of has a similar story in that it was so different from what people are expecting, especially considering it was like the first sequel to like a first direct sequel to a Final Fantasy game. Up until this point, it was an anthology. 1 through 10 were all separate stories. Though I did hear that somehow Final Fantasy 7 and 10 are somehow weirdly connected through like a rocket ship or some shit like that. I
7 and 10 too are connected. I don't know about 7 and 10. 10 2 has a lot in common. Well, not a lot, but 10 2 has something in common with Metal Gear Solid 2 as well, in that it was kind of set up for failure insofar as it's the sequel to a beloved entry in a series. People love Metal Gear Solid 1, and I think they did back then. I actually don't know. Again, I've never played any Metal Gear Solid.
Oh,
But
okay.
10 was beloved almost immediately. Many folks still call it the best one in the series. And, 10 2 coming out as the first sequel to a beloved game, frankly, an all female cast in the early 2000s. There's just a lot working against it.
Yeah, there definitely was. And I think also with this, we'll get into it in a moment as I kind of talk as we get through some of my criticisms of it. I think it didn't just have momentum against it because it was coming out, it was a sequel to a beloved game, but also like they did themselves no favors with their pacing. I think the pacing, at least for me, is what really turns this game from something that could have been like phenomenal to just or to be really good. I should say, maybe phenomenal is too strong of a word, but like really good to, at least for me, just something that's like, this is an okay game that's not for me. It's a good game that's not for me, I should say, which made it feel more okay. And I guess as a quick disclaimer, listeners, and to my patrons, I did not beat this game. I got to the 5th and final chapter, and the difficulty ramped up like crazy, and I got really angry at it, and I was not enjoying my time anymore. So I didn't want to continue bashing my head against the wall and have that color my impression of the rest of the game, because overall I didn't hate the game, but I have a lot of issues with it, and we will definitely get into that in a little bit. So Rick, I want to throw it over to you first, though, before we actually dive further into discussing this. What's your history with Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2? Like, I know this is a 10-2 episode, but they're just kind of connected just a little bit. So what's your history with 10 and 10-2?
Yeah, in some ways, what makes 10-2 so good is how it relates to 10. So it behooves everyone to take it as a package in addition to just the game itself. For both of these, they came out whenever I was in, I want to say elementary school, I'm pretty sure, but I was a kid. I didn't have my own money. My parents would buy me games. They weren't like super involved. They didn't really give a shit. Sorry, can we swear on here? I can't
Oh,
remember.
absolutely.
Okay, I figured, but they would just see a cover and be like, "Oh, that looks cool," which is perplexing because I can understand why they would see the cover of Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy X and buy it. But 10-2, or another one that I had, Xenosaga Episode 1, I really don't understand how that cover was seen and picked up. Anyway, 10 and 10-2 both, I got them whenever I was a kid. I played through them both. I loved them both almost immediately.
Mhm.
Final Fantasy at that time could do no wrong. I loved 7, I loved 8, I loved 9. And I never had a Super Nintendo. And I remember, 10 was kind of the big one, right? 10 was the huge story. It was a big dramatic arc, a tragic love story. And me and my neighbors would all play it. We loved it. 10
Mhm.
2, I think I was the only one that had, and I still loved it. Even back then, it didn't bother me that it was an all girl cast. It didn't bother me that it was so campy. None of that mattered. I kind of loved it from the get go. And a big reason that I loved it was the battle system, which I'm sure we'll talk about
Oh
too.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's kind of just been that way, since I got it. If anything, my feelings have gotten, hopefully more nuanced, but only stronger for the game.
I could understand that, especially considering like at the end of Final Fantasy X, how like, spoiler alerts for 10, by the way. Real quick, this will be a small spoiler for 10. We'll spoil the 10-2 story later on in the episode, but like Tidus, the main character of 10, quote unquote dies at the end of 10. Die is not technically the correct term because of the story elements, and I'm not going to go over I'm not going to over explain it right now. Maybe we'll explain it a little bit further in the episode. We'll see where the conversation takes us. But Tidus dies at the end of 10. So 10-2 picks up 2 years after the events of 10, and you get to play as Yuna, who was the love interest of Tidus in the first game in 10, and you also get to play as Riku again, who I totally forgot that Riku was her cousin. That is mind-boggling to me. And then a new character named Pain, and I could see why you would enjoy this game at the time. Like it got a good battle system. The music is really good. It's just it's a really feel good soundtrack. Specifically, what is it? I think the menu music, Eternity, Memories, and Light. Right? I think that's the name of the track.
Sure.
You know what I'm talking about, though. The menu music, right?
Yeah.
God, that song is good. So the first time I heard that, I remember getting a copy of 10-2. Actually, I want to say I got it from Circuit City before they went out of business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was either that or I think I got Final Fantasy 12 and Dirge of Cerberus from. So I think it was 12 and Dirge of Cerberus, but for some reason I conflate 10-2 with that. In any case, I remember popping that disc in, popping 10-2 in, and just being blown away by the menu music was so good. It was so, it just like I would just linger on the menu for like 30 minutes the first time I played it. I was just like, this is just beautiful. It's so peaceful. So that was kind of like in all honesty, that's about all the experience I had with 10-2 before really earnestly trying to play through it for this episode. So I guess to start off, though, we're going to talk about the gameplay, but for the people who have not played 10-2 yet, just a little bit of context as we get into it. The game takes place, like I said before, 2 years after the events of Final Fantasy X. Yuna, who was a summoner in Final Fantasy X, is now what's called a sphere hunter, which is kind of just like a not a mercenary, but just think of like, a scrap finder, someone who goes around and is searching for treasure. A treasure finder. That's a treasure hunter. Excuse me. That's the better word. Treasure finder. Scrap. What the hell am I saying? She's a treasure hunter in this, and she's going around to find these spheres, which in Final Fantasy X, they were kind of part of the sphere grid. In this, they are more just you never really use it too much in terms of like how can I put this? You use spheres a lot in this game, but the Gull Wings, the group that Yuna is a part of in this, they make it sound almost like they're, hunters that will then sell those spheres on like in a market for profit. You never really see that part of their business strategy in this game, but that's kind of what they're trying to do. So that's what I meant before when you don't really use the spheres the way they intended. It's because the way the game sets it up is that you're hunting these spheres to sell them, but you never really do. You just get them because some of them have videos in them, and you can use that to learn about different parts of the story, as well as backstory or other parts of the story from Final Fantasy X. And the overall kind of setup of the story of this is that Yuna finds a sphere that has a memory inside of it that has someone that looks like Tidus, but she knows it's not him, and she's confused as like why does this person look so much like Tidus? I have to start looking for this, and it kind of begins a long quest to kind of learn more about this, and we'll go more into the themes because I think it's more of a personal quest for her than anything with a specific objective at first that changes as the game goes on. And that's really the setup for this game in terms of like why you are flying around Spira, the name of the world in this game. Do you have anything to add to that, Rick, before we talk about the gameplay?
Just in terms of the story, I think two other things. First, there is like a power vacuum sort of political story going on in the background of this. And that kind of is the quote unquote plot, right? If we had to talk about the events of the story, it is about finding that mystery man, but it is so directly tied into the power vacuum and these three factions that are warring for sort of prominence, which, by the way, is super interesting if we're talking about the lore and the story reasons. Like, and that's one of the ways this game excels, is that I truly think that it is a perfect sequel to the events of 10. Like, it is the logical conclusion of,
I agree with that.
Of the events of 10. That's one thing. The second thing, and I think a little more importantly, is this game is so character focused. And
Hmm.
I think if you're looking for an overarching story like a Xenogears or like a Xeno anything, or even like a Final Fantasy VII, you might be setting yourself up for disappointment. A lot of what makes this game special is how the characters, one, have grown from 10, two, grow throughout the story, and three, just interact with each other. It's very character driven, not at all unlike, a Saturday morning sitcom or a Saturday morning anime or something like that. As long as you approach this game knowing what it is and don't expect something unreasonable, then a good time awaits you. It's whenever you approach it, and I'm not saying that you did this, by the way. It's whenever you approach this expecting something that it's not, expecting a grand narrative about religion or about the nature of humanity or something really serious. That's when folks get upset, and it's definitely not that. It never pretends to be that. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it has a lot to offer if you meet it where it's at.
So I would agree with you that that this is a really good sequel to 10 in terms of like what the next step of the story it's trying to tell. I wrote down a couple notes for myself just to organize my thoughts with this. And some of the things I wrote down is that the setup for the world of 10.2 is really great. Like we laid out with the plot, how it kind of looks at what happened after the events of Final 10. Like, what would Spira look like? What would this world look like in the aftermath of Sin's defeat? And in that aftermath, the world of Spira. Excuse me. The world of Spira is grappling with a lot. Their worldwide religion is completely gone now. Yu Yevon is gone. So, like, what would that look like when you have this structure that has been in this world for hundreds of years or however many decades, right? With multiple like summoners going on pilgrimages, and none of that's needed anymore. And that's where this power struggle comes in that you mentioned before, Rick, where there's like three different factions kind of vying for power in this world. And then with you as Yuna, this game is a very personal look at Yuna's character and her arc, and like how she's getting over the events of 10, which I want to go into detail a little bit a little bit later on in the episode as to my thoughts on her character arc and stuff. But my issue with this game isn't necessarily the gameplay, though. With I do think the difficulty ramping is frustrating, but we'll get to that in a moment. Um, it's the way they tell this story. They set up this world to be phenomenal, and then they underdeliver, in my opinion. Or I shouldn't say they underdeliver. They deliver what you're looking for, but not in a satisfying way. That's what I'm trying to say. I was talking to a coworker today, and I kind of equated it to a math problem. Like, remember in school when you're taking math and you have to show your work how you got an answer to an equation or something like that?
Sure.
This game poses a very interesting and complex equation, and it gives you an answer that's satisfying. It gives you the right answer, quote unquote, but it doesn't show the work of how it got to there. And that's kind of how I feel about this game, where you have this wonderful setup, the power vacuum in Spira, Yuna's personal journey, and the ending is really nice in terms of like what Una learns and this and like how the power vacuum thing kind of comes to a conclusion and everything. But there's no like narrative, like there's no satisfying narrative buildup or layoff or fall off, I guess, leading to it. It has an intro. I think that you sent me a video essay before we recorded this, Rick, from Brando EXP on YouTube, and I thought he really made a good point where this game is like the first 30% of a story and the last 20% of a story, and the middle 50% is just missing. And I think he really nailed that. And I think that's what's frustrating to me about this, is that they did a great job and had really interesting ideas and asked really interesting questions as to like what would happen after this quote unquote happily ever after story. I understand it's not a happily ever after, but people use that analogy for like the fairy tales, right? Like what would happen after the happily ever after? Well, what happens after this? They ask the good questions, and they give like a good answer, but the logic isn't always satisfying how they got to the answer. Does that make sense?
I think so. I would like to give a disclaimer as well that I've beat this game several times over the years. I did not have time to replay it for this episode. I did some lore diving and I watched a few story summaries. So there may be some areas of the plot, general arc that I simply have forgotten and cannot cite. My only counter, I'm not saying that I think you're incorrect. I think the pacing of this is lopsided and inconsistent. What my only counter to that would be I think to keep in mind the Saturday morningness of this game, insofar as it isn't aiming to make that side of the plot necessarily the number one most important thing. It's still living in those character interactions and the sort of quote unquote filler episodes with all the side quests, which actually kind of ties into the difficulty scaling thing. The game expects you to be doing side quests and quite a bit of them, and if you're not, that's when you get
Yep.
severely underleveled. It does want you to do that, and it can feel like filler episodes. And indeed, if you go and look for every side quest, if you try to 100% the game,
Oh,
the
God help
pacing
you.
does feel, well, yes, one, God help you, it's a miserable experience. But two, the pacing is incredibly inconsistent and bumpy. And this game could be like the model of that that super popular discourse from 2017, ludonarrative dissonance. This game could be the poster child of that, because you have all this serious stuff going on, and at any time you could just go and do a sphere break side quest, or you can go and massage LeBlanc for some reason. There,
That's
there.
that is a mini game that ends a chapter. You massage this hot
Oh,
lady
right,
that
right.
has her boobs out for 100% of the game.
I should have known better to think that that would not be a main story quest.
That
That's
is a
on me.
main story quest.
Yeah, but if you go out and do all of the side quests and look for everything this game has to offer, yeah, you start to get a lot of those filler episodes, and it can become you get that sense that you had whenever you grew up watching Digimon or Power Rangers. Well, maybe not so much Power Rangers, Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball Z, where you're like, there have been a couple filler episodes. Where are we again? Like, what's going on in the plot? Oh, right, 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 right. Okay, okay. You get a lot of that.
Sailor Moon is a good comparison though, because that's one of the inspirations for this game. The Magical Girl anime was a very heavily it was heavily inspired. They were heavily inspired from, excuse me, like Magical Girl anime type of stuff, Sailor Moon and the like. And you can kind of see that because the way the game's battle system works in this is that you have it's the dress sphere system. And the dress spheres, for all intents and purposes, are classes that you would see in like Final Fantasy V or something like that. But they're a lot more creative, I would argue. Like they're not just here's your knight, here's your like warrior, here's your mage or whatever. They have like what is it? There's like gun mage, you have samurai, you have black mage, you have white mage, you have there's like a costume one, like mascot is a class, kind of very bard-ish almost. There's songstress. Actually, I guess that would be more like a bard. But in any case, there's lots of different options for it, and you, instead of having a sphere grid like you did in Final 10, you have a almost like a dress sphere grid. But that makes it interesting too, because the way it works is that you have these grids that have a certain number of slots that you can put as however many dress spheres you want on it, however many that grid will allow. So like the basic one is like four different dress spheres. You can put up to four different dress spheres on it, and you can place them in any slot that you want. However, you do want to place them strategically, because depending on the way it works is that, say you have say you currently have like the warrior dress sphere on, and in the sphere grid that you have that equipped to, that warrior dress sphere equipped to, there, let's say the other three, that I guess it doesn't matter what the other three are. This is so confusing without a visual aid. I'm realizing as I'm trying to describe this, but I guess the best way I could describe without a visual aid, think of like a square, right? And in each corner of the square, of the four corners of the square, you have a different dress sphere. So maybe the bottom left corner is warrior, the top left corner is gun mage, the top right corner is white mage, and the bottom right corner is black mage. And you're currently in the warrior dress sphere, which is on the bottom left. So if you wanted to go, so the lines that are the two lines that are connecting to that corner you're in is going straight up is the gunner is the gun mage, whatever it is, that dress sphere straight up, and to the right is your white mage. And then maybe on that line connecting these two spheres, there might be some stat boost that'll tell you, like magic +5 or strength +5. So what that tells you is that if you're in the warrior dress sphere and you move across the line that says magic +5 and it's going over to, say, the white mage, now when you switch over to that white mage class mid battle, you switching the dress spheres mid battle, your magic stat will get a +5 boost. And that can, but that only works if your dress sphere is connected to via a line to another dress sphere, via like the border of the square, as it were. And these sphere grids that you can place these dress spheres on, they change in complexity of design. Like, I only just gave an example of a square. Some of them are triangles, which I know is more simplistic, but some of them are like figure eights, and some of them are like circles with layers inside of it. Like, there's lots of different complex designs for it. But for the sake of ease of explaining it for this episode, just imagine a square, and whatever, and in each corner there's a socket for your dress spheres. And if that socket is in one of the corners, whichever it's connected to via the line or the border of the square, you might have some extra stat boost. Does that did I explain that okay, Rick? Did that make sense?
I think you explained it fine. I think this is part of what makes this battle system so exciting to play for me. So let's go back to the shapes example. You had said a square. A square is useful if you want somebody to specialize. So for example, on this past playthrough, I made my Yuna almost exclusively specializing in magic and debuffing. So she had, the white mage, the black mage, the songstress, and I think I did have a warrior or festivalist or something in there.
Mm-hmm.
Just, so she's not always using MP. Now that's cool because then I can get a square sphere grid or a garment grid, excuse me, or something similar, something simple to where she can go through each of them pretty quickly, and each of the nodes A to B, B to C, C to D, D to A, that's going to boost her magic. So that is tailored to her. Now on the flip side, if I wanted to do something with Riku, who I made much more of a generalist here, sometimes thief, sometimes songstress, sometimes berserker, sometimes the animal tamer one, beast tamer. For that one, I think she was in like a circle with two nodes in the middle or something. Not nearly as many of the buffs, but her kit now is varied, so she can do a lot more. And then there's an extra wrinkle here that the more nodes you have, the more difficult it is to get to the ultimate sphere, dress sphere, if you have it. So there's that extra wrinkle. But the customization levels on this is so high. It's some of the highest I've seen in any JRPG. And that's part of what makes it so exciting and fun, is that the builds, they are... No, I mean, they're obviously not limitless, but they are plentiful and they can make replays that much more exciting. Plus, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I really like the magical girl genre. I always have. I
Yeah,
like
I have
Sailor
no
Moon a
issues with
lot.
it. I think it's a cool idea for this.
I absolutely love the transitions. They look so good. Everybody's got unique costumes. So even if everybody
Mm-hmm.
is playing as a warrior, Yuna has Tidus's sword, which is such a nice touch. And everybody's got the different black mage outfits, and it's really, really nice. It's one of my favorite. Now, I will say those animations can get a little bit old if you're, on your fifth playthrough or something. But you can
Mm-hmm.
turn those off in the menu, thankfully. Yeah, that's one half of why I love this system. And I do. I think it's so exciting and fun.
I think the idea of the system is much more interesting to play for other people than it is for me. Like, I want to be very clear. This is not actually a criticism of the battle system. It's more of a criticism of myself playing it. Um, because the idea of like how you can switch job classes, and depending on how it's laid out in that grid, you can get really interesting stat boosts, or like how you described it, Rick, where like depending on how you want to build your character, where you want to be highly specialized or generalized, that's really interesting, and that's a really really cool way to encourage creativity and encourage like experimentation and stuff like that. I have a weird aversion in RPG games where like I don't like wasting turn. It feels like a waste of a turn for stat boosts. Like, I'm not, and I understand that's wrong thinking. I'm not saying I'm right with that. A lot of times, like, you need to like have a character, do a move so that way it can increase everyone's attack. So while yes, that character could not attack that round, in for over the next couple rounds or next couple turns, you will do much more damage, or maybe you'll be able to take a bunch less damage because you boosted their defense. Or in this instance, like you're switching one dress sphere to another, so that way, yeah, you may have to waste a turn by switching dress spheres, but now your stats are increased, and maybe you're switching to a sphere that's better suited for this fight, right? Like, there's a lot of customizability with it. I just never found a use for it. I
Yeah,
I,
so
I would pick a class and stick with it, and then I would try other classes, and it just never felt very rewarding to me to bother switching classes very often. And like, I kept Pain as a warrior for almost my entire playthrough until I quit. Riku, I switched to warrior every now and then I had Yuna as the white mage. And in all honesty, I almost feel like I should have just made Riku a warrior and kept Pain as a warrior and just kept Yuna a white mage and not experimented at all. Like, I don't know. I think what's frustrating, and it's not the game's fault, is that they built this very rich system that I have very little interest in experimenting with.
so to maybe steelman your argument a little bit, it's a system that's robust but not so good for random battles. It's good for mini bosses and boss fights, but for random battles it can get a little bit tedious.
Mm,
um, Another thing too, and I'm not nitpicking you, but the turn isn't wasted. You do get to go immediately as soon as you change dress spheres. That action's not wasted. You get to go again, and I think that's because this game isn't set up like Final Fantasy X, where you do have a true turn order. It is true turn based. This is more like to misappropriate a certain sci-fi show. It's kind of timey wimey in how it sets
uh,
up its turn-based stuff.
yeah.
It's a constant cycle. It's constantly turning, meaning if you sit and just wait and think, do I want to cast Pray or do I want to cast Cure? You're going to get baffled by the enemies. They're just going to hit you and hit you and hit you.
Hmm.
It's fast-paced in that way, which is part two of why I love the system. But because it is so cyclical, turns really, and because you get to go immediately after changing your sphere, I don't really see the turns as being wasted. Now, you
That's
could think
fair.
of your time as being wasted because those transitions can take a little bit.
Yeah.
But and maybe it can halt the flow of battle if you're constantly changing. But if I'm going to steelman my argument now, that's what I would say. I'm not arguing that this is a perfect system, but that is why I love it. Also because of how fast paced it is. And here's something that I genuinely don't like about it too, Josh, is I like that interruptions are kind of a thing in this game, wherein if you wait and time your attack just right, you can attack an enemy as they're in their attack animation, which stuns them for a second. And if you really time it right, you can like stun lock them by having your characters each attack in certain intervals. Interruptions are a thing and they're a strategy. That's very cool. Where it becomes a bit of a pain is how magic works, specifically offensive magic. Because to cast a spell, your meter has to charge. Your ATB bar goes up. You select the spell. Your ATB bar has to go up again. What
So
happens if
it's
that
almost like,
character gets it?
yeah.
What happens if that character gets attacked? Well, they're stunned, and if their bar is full and they haven't cast yet, they get hit. They have to go through the hit animation. They have to go through the animation to get back into casting pose. They are primo targets for getting stun locked, which makes magic a serious pain to really use a lot in this game.
Pun
Now, magic
intended?
is
A serious pain? Huh? Huh?
no, I did not. I didn't make pain. I didn't make pain do a lot of magic. I tried to have her
Neither
do
did
black
I.
black magic, but I don't know. But yeah, that is a bit of a pain point for me. I'll intend that pun. It's I do wish that were a little bit snappier. Magic can feel like such a burden to use. And to be quite honest with you, if it was OP, I would forgive it. I can't remember if it is or not, though. My memory is saying it's not. From
It
the,
never
the
felt OP to me when I was using it. It almost felt like like doing black magic almost felt like a waste of time. Like, white magic's a necessity to heal, but
yeah, yeah.
that's about it. Like, I never really felt like it was useful. In all honesty, my main strategy was to go over to warrior, have them use armor and power breaks to like just weaken the enemy a whole bunch, because you would not only do damage but also do status effects. If the enemy allowed you, obviously if it's a boss, sometimes they don't allow those status effects to go into consideration, but I would always just do that so they would do less damage and they would take more hits while I was doing damage, and that was my general strategy.
Yeah, and that's a good one for early game too. It'll get you through a lot of tough situations. I agree. I don't think Magic, I don't remember Magic being overpowered. My most recent playthrough to just refamiliarize myself with for this episode was on New Game Plus, where you have everything from your previous save already unlocked. So I had access to more powerful spells than the beginning wanted you to have, so it felt overpowered, but that's not
Mm,
indicative of, how the balancing actually is. And indeed, a black mage and white mage, obviously those are useful. I remember Gun Mage being my least favorite class, and it wasn't even close. Like country
yeah.
mile, it was not close. I thought Gun Mage was quite useless. I remember feeling that's kind of this game's version of a Blue Mage, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
Um, I actually don't even really know, because I also didn't really use the gun mage at all. Though watching that video that you sent me, it brought up another aspect of the battle system that I had no idea about, where if you do combos where you can time your attacks with your characters quickly, and you have them attacked in quick succession, the damage will increase exponentially based off the combo.
Oh yeah,
So with someone as a gun mage, it was, Yuna starts out as a gun mage, so if you keep her as that, she has that one move where she'll fire like 15 rounds at once, which
now
they
that's
don't.
Gunner, not Gun Mage.
Oh, that's what it is. I'm thinking gunner. Now, my bad, never mind.
Yeah,
Never mind.
no, no worries. Gunner is okay. I actually had Riku as my Gunner. I took Yuna off of that pretty quick. Gun Mage is another sphere, dress sphere you get, and I'm almost positive it's like the Blue Mage, and you start off with nothing because you haven't learned anything, and the attack is just so extremely low, and it was really tough to use. And I'm sure, I didn't give it a chance. That maybe it does the Final Fantasy thing where Blue Mage is just overpowered, uh, and I just don't know about it. But I never ever ever used that one.
I don't even remember you. Yeah, I don't remember using the gun mage at all either. I just no. Like I said, I didn't experiment a lot with a lot of the different dress spheres, because once I found something that I enjoyed, I just kind of stuck with it. And like the perks of like learning all the different skills, especially when you switch classes or dress or classes, for lack of a better term, um, it just never felt like it was worthwhile to me just to learn something new, when like magic always felt kind of useless. Stat stuff always, or black magic felt kind of useless because I didn't even think about it. It basically takes two full turns for you to be able to use it. And then the stat based stuff, I never mess with that in most RPGs. I know I'm not playing the game to like in min maxing the proper way when I don't do that, but I always just focus so much on physical attacks whenever I play an RPG, and I it's something that I would say is a fault of my own. I think that's why I was trying to be very clear when I said I don't think the battle system's bad. I just didn't find it like completely engaging. It didn't turn me away from it. It didn't turn me off at all.
Sure.
It just kind of felt like a means to an end as opposed to a standout thing. But when I would see people breaking it down in so much detail and depth, like yourself or the Brandovid and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, I was just playing it wrong. I'm not playing it the way that you're supposed to play it. And once
Well,
again, that's on me.
and like a lot of things related to video games, literature, movies, whatever, a lot of this is going to come down to taste, and all we can do is express why we like the taste of something. I can't tell you after you express to me succinctly and precisely why you don't like the taste. I can't say no, you're wrong, actually. Unless when people tell me Arby's is bad, I'll say no, you're wrong. But no, like you know what I mean though. Taste is a broad thing, and there's no accounting for it. If somebody just doesn't like something, sometimes it's a taste thing, and that's kind of where the conversation ends. All we can do is express why it is or is not something we enjoy. And I don't begrudge you for not enjoying this. Different strokes. Some people prefer the hardcore turn-based combat of Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy One, or no, four was ATB. Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy One, or Baldur's
Hmm.
Gate. And there's nothing wrong with that. And some people prefer the real-time combat of 16, and they're wrong, but they're not a part of this conversation, so we don't need to talk. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Or am I?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I think I always try to make the distinction with stuff where it's like, do I think it's bad or is it just not for me? And I feel like a lot of times people, for like, especially when you see on social media, people forget that nuance. They just go, oh no, this is bad. Because, like, for example, like fighting games, I don't think fighting games are bad. I'm just bad at them, therefore I don't enjoy them. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean that Street Fighter 6 is a bad game because I'm bad at it. It just means that I'm bad at it. Um, and with this, it doesn't mean that the battle system is bad. It just might not have it might not have grabbed me the way it did other people. And I always try to make those distinctions when I'm covering a game on the show. Is like, is this just me, or is it actually like, do I actually have major issues with it other than it just wasn't for me? Like, when we get to talk about the story in more depth, I'll explain what my issues with the pacing and whatnot were in much more depth, where I actually think there are actual problems, and it's just not my tastes, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, I think the battle system is like, as much as it didn't click with me, it's one of those things where I can step back and look at it and just be like, they did a really good job. They made a really interesting battle system, and the dress spheres are just a cool idea. Like, I think it's a really fun thing to do, to just switch up outfits all the time and see, like, part of the fun of it too was just, what is this going to look like? What does a gun mage look like? What do you mean by that? What how do they do a samurai in this? Like, there's so many different unique takes and like designs. And I believe they also did like there was like some fan contests that Square did, where fans would submit designs for characters for the different classes. I don't know if any of them got approved or like actually added into the game, but there's a video from Final Fantasy Union on YouTube that showed some of the things that were sent in, and there's some wild costume ideas.
Oh, that's neat. That's very cool.
And you know what? In the spirit of fun facts, probably some other stuff I should have brought up. And it does tie into gameplay. One of the other things that this game is focused on is mini games, and gosh golly gee, there are a lot of mini games. Specifically, the director Motomu Toriyama stated there was a focus on having mini games in this game. The reason being is where the people who bought Final Fantasy X-2, if they played it, and I quote, they wouldn't need any other game, end quote. Because the idea being there's just so much variety with all the different mini games. So they really wanted to pad the game out. Maybe pad's a strong. No, I think pad is an apt term for this, because there's very little in terms of main story and a lot with filler content in this game, which I don't think is necessarily bad, but I do think because of the difficulty, the issues with the difficulty balance that you also mentioned before, Rick, how like you need to do the side quests in order to be a high enough level just to continue on in the game. I think that's a problem, but that's, I'm
Interesting.
willing to overlook pacing issues.
I don't see that as a problem. I just see that as the game teaching you how to play it. And previous Final Fantasies have done the same thing. If you try to mainline the story, you're gonna get in trouble. You've got to at least grind. I do agree. This game is, I mean, bloated is a word for it. I will say again, the magic is in the moments and not necessarily in the grand narrative, but it is bloated, and that is an absolutely insane thing for who did you say said that? Matoru Toriyama?
Yeah, Motomu Toriyama.
Insane thing for them to say, for this to be the only game you need. That's absurd. They did not achieve that at all, because most of these mini games are forgettable or not very good. Sphere Break, I don't know. Did you do Sphere Break very much?
I didn't do any of the mini games. I'm not a mini game
Okay.
person. I I think it's something I actually want to work on in how I play games. I was thinking about this a lot today and yesterday, where it was like, man, why is it that when I get to like narrative based games that side quests just feel like such a chore to me? Like I don't want to do any of them. I just want to go to the next plot beat. And part of me wonders of like, am I only playing games to beat them instead of to just enjoy my experience with them, you know? And I don't think
Mhm.
it's entirely that. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to play games just to beat them, but I do think there's a little bit of a fundamental, like you're missing something fundamental about games if that's the only reason you're playing them. And I don't think that's the only reason I play games. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I like to like talk about
Oh,
games in a
interesting.
more critically, but it is something that I think about in RPGs. Am I not playing RPGs to their fullest when I'm so focused on the main narrative and not allowing myself to kind of poke at the edges of the world they've created?
See, that's funny that you say that you wouldn't be doing that if you did your podcast. I call that podcast behavior, wanting to just play a game and get through it and get through it and get through it, so you can talk about it on the podcast or post in somebody's Discord about how many games you've played and wear it like a badge of honor. I beat 112 this year. Oh, good for you, good for you. How many do you remember? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I'm being a little bit, I'm not being facetious. I genuinely believe that. I don't mean to be mean though.
No, I didn't take it that
Because
way.
it's something that I struggle with too. Like one of the conscious decisions I made on my show is to do more extended episodes, part one, two, three. Because I found myself going through games and I couldn't quite remember them. Emerson has a quote attributed to him, Ralph Waldo Emerson, that is, I don't remember the books that I've read any more than the meals that I've eaten, but even so, they made me.
Mm-hmm.
And I resonate with that a lot because I read, and I play games, and I remember some of the big, big, big picture things. And I most importantly remember how they made me feel, which is the most important thing in many respects. But I don't always remember the plot. I couldn't tell you the plot to Xenogears if you asked me, but I remember loving the game. That all being said, just to bring it back, I think another part of it too is just as we get older, it becomes more difficult to fully immerse ourselves in one game
That's
because
true
we
too.
are conscious of the divvying of time we're forced to do between work obligations and home life obligations. Whereas when we were children, this was almost non existent at best, or at worst, divided up for us by like parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a magic that I desperately wish I could reclaim, uh, but I don't know how.
Part of me thinks that I would love just to set aside some time where I don't have like a weekend where I don't have any responsibilities and I just sit down and play a game, like it's hard now as because married with a kid, full-time job, podcast on the side, like this podcast and everything, and I love doing the podcast. Like this is not like oh woe is me, this podcast doesn't let me fully enjoy games.
And even if
Argue
you did have that weekend too, could you truly say that you could go through the whole weekend playing and never once think about your wife or your children or your
Oh,
podcast?
absolutely not.
Probably not.
Not
Right,
even in the
exactly.
slightest. And also, I don't even know if I could do it without thinking about the show. Like, oh, could I cover this on the show type of thing? Um, I will say, though, I've noticed, at least with me, that there are very few games anymore that will pique my interest enough where the side quests and the side searching stuff doesn't. Like how could I'm misspeaking. Where there's very few games I play where the side quests actually interest me. Most recently, and actually the episode will have been out. Is it going to be last week? I think it's the episode from, yeah, it'll be the episode from last. Oh, no, sorry. It's the episode next week. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This is a little spoiler alert. I played that game and that episode's already recorded and everything. That game, I loved poking around the edges. Like I loved exploring the world and seeing what it was, but that game really like sucked me in a way I wasn't really expecting to. Um, 10-2, since I wasn't as engaged with it as I was in like other Final Fantasies and stuff like that, it was harder for me to like want to poke around the edges of the world. um and also I think in a weird sense, the older I get, the more older Final Fantasies that do random battles like this, it's harder for me to want to do the side quests because just to the like random battles, while I used to love them, now, and I still don't mind them now, I tolerate them now, I should say, I feel like they discourage players from exploring because you are trying to explore to learn more things about the world, but when you try to do more, you're met with combat, and it like, which I wouldn't mind, but it feels like it just is kind of like it's it's breaking the immersion for me. Like if I'm like, oh, I want to go learn about this thing over here. Like what is it in the one area here in 10.2, there was a side quest I did where you there's a giant field to explore. I think it's where you did like the chocobo races in 10. I think it was like that giant field. And I was like, wow, this place is huge. I wonder what else is in here. I don't feel like exploring it though, because I'm going to have to wait through a bunch of random battles just to figure out that probably there's a wall over here or something like that. Like
Sure.
it, you know what I mean? And the
Yeah.
reward for exploration in in these types of older RPGs isn't always going to be worth the amount of time that I'm going to spend just waiting through random battles. And I almost wonder if that's where it's coming from with this, where the random battles really just impede my enjoyment anymore, which is frustrating because I used to love random battles, but now depending on the game and depending on the frequency and depending on like what the game asks of me, I'm having a harder time finding the tolerance for them. And that's not to say the random battles are like there's too much of them in this game. I don't think there's actually too many. It's not like the encounter rate is crazy high, but like it's harder for me to find motivation to explore when I know I'm just going to get a bunch of random battles when I'm just trying to like see what's over on the other side of this map type of thing, you know?
It's the autonomy of being able to choose, right? And I think the argument for random battles, they started random battles because of programming constraints, right? They just
Yeah.
didn't have the RAM to or whatever to program monsters on the screen. And then it just became the norm. But the argument for random battles is that it kind of negates grinding. If you're exploring and not running, you should level up and you should be fine. I agree with you though. Like, do I mind random battles? No. Would I prefer having it like Clair Obscur or Persona 3 where they're on the world map? Yeah, absolutely. Because, like, then I get to choose when I'm exploring and I get to choose when I'm grinding. That choice is left up to me. And I think that's probably the way to do it.
I guess that really is what it just kind of boils down to. Um, I will say also in regards to the gameplay of 10.2, to kind of bring it back a little bit more, because I know I'm kind of getting off topic into more areas of gaming that I'm like struggling with on a personal level, not necessarily. I mean, 10.2 brought me to it, but it's not specifically related to 10.2. So to bring it back, something I thought that 10.2 did. That like I said, I like the combat system and everything. I do think the platforming elements they added platforming into this. It was a little clunky, but I didn't hate it. It felt a little superfluous, but it also didn't like detract from the game for me. Did it at all for you?
No, it's just kind of there. They added the sphere hunting aesthetic, which is like mildly reminiscent of something like Indiana Jones, exploring temples and stuff. The thing about the platforming is it's just not necessary. There's no accuracy involved. Do you want to hold the button to jump or do you want to not hold it to fall down? That's
Mm-hmm.
the only choice you're making. So do I think it's bad? No. Do I think it's unnecessary? Yeah. The animations are fine to watch, I guess, but yeah, kind of lukewarm on it.
I would say the only thing that I have against it is I forgot that you could do it. So there'd be times that I would like be at a spot. I'm like, I don't know where to go from here. I'm like, oh, you're supposed to hold the button to jump, which is a failing of me. Just to be clear, I don't think that's the game's fault. I just forgot you could do that. The other thing I wanted to bring up in terms, it's kind of in regards to the gameplay, but it's also kind of in regards to the world building of the game. I think that this game, like when I first the big thing I noticed when I first played it before I had any issues with pacing or anything like that, because this game is a sequel, it does none of the or I should say it relies extremely heavily obviously on the world building of the first game, which makes sense, it's a sequel. But I haven't played Final Fantasy X in over a decade. So coming back to Spira, and there's no like you can just hop around on the world map at will through this airship, through the gull wings, or through your airship or whatever. And because of that, I had no, like, it was so hard to understand where I was going or the rhyme or reason of what I was doing. Like, it very much just felt like, okay, here's a list of objectives. Go to this place, complete this objective, go back to the ship, go to this place, complete this objective, go back to the ship. Which normally I like in like MMOs and stuff like that. I like where the game is very clear about what they want you to do. But in this, because I couldn't see how all the different bits of the world connected to each other again, I do think it lost a little bit of the world. I think it did a disservice in this because the world doesn't feel fleshed out anymore. And it's not, which is weird though, because all of Final 10 is in there. Like, you could literally go walk the same exact trail that Tidus did through the world of Final Fantasy 10, right? Like, you could just go straight through it. But because the game encourages you to hop around, like, all these different parts of the world don't feel connected, versus when you play it in 10, the game forces you to connect them all because you're literally walking on the pilgrimage to get to everywhere, right? So it kind of makes the world feel a little bit more lonely, I guess, a little more disjointed. And when you go around and see all the characters from 10 and they're like, do you remember me? I didn't remember anybody, which, once again, fault of me. It's a sequel to the game. It's a sequel to 10, so maybe I should have played 10 again. But I think this game, it's not really a knock, I should say. It's something that I didn't enjoy, but I think it's more speaks to the way you're supposed to play this game, is that it is the first direct sequel, and it is the most direct sequel of a sequel you could ever sequel, because you need to play 10 shortly before playing this to have a lot to understand the context of the world around you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this all sounds like a Josh problem, man.
Yeah.
I look like I kid a little bit. I mean, I don't kid, but I do kid a little bit.
That's fine.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. If we're going to steelman this argument, which I'm going to try to do, Final Fantasy X. And by the way, I just feel like I'm learning just more about your taste in games. You it seems like you prefer a more guided experience in terms of a narrative and not so much of a go crazy, go where you want sort of thing, which is fine. But Final Fantasy X, that world is a world built on cyclical death. At most, they get 10 years of peace before their entire world, as
It's
they know
turned
it,
upside
is
down.
destroyed again, and they have to rebuild. Sometimes as little as their city, sometimes as drastic as lives and families. Constant cycles of death alongside of a religion that ultimately was lying to them. It makes all the sense in the world for that society to then, once that is rid of them completely and their shackles are thrown off, for them to overcorrect into abundance. And that's kind of one of the like defining traits of 10-2 is abundance. This world is abundant. It's extravagant. It is overindulgent is another good way to describe it. And part of that goes into the design philosophy. Like you said, you have access to every area from the get up. And boy, howdy, you better go to every one in every chapter lest you miss some of the 100%ing. Which I will say, if you're a content fiend and you love additional content, bang for your buck, good Lord, man. I mean, 20 or so locations, and you can basically get unique material in most of them at any time. That's kind of insane. There's so much packed into here, but it can be overwhelming. They'll tell you where the hotspots are. That's where you go to progress the main story. The rest, you just got to go. And yeah, you're not being walked through it from point to point to sort of feel a cohesion of the world, because it does expect you to have played 10. That expectation is kind of baked in. But if we're judging this in a vacuum, which is perfectly valid, then yes, that cohesion of the world is something they expect the player to build up for themselves entirely. And that is more than fair to criticize it for in a vacuum.
I guess to clarify my own point a little bit, I think part of my criticism is definitely a Josh problem. And other part I think is actually like a more fair criticism. What I mean by that is like all the world building, like, the characters from the previous game and this and that, that's 100% a Josh problem, right? Like I didn't play Final Fantasy X recently, and not a lot of it's in my memory. So that's 100% me. I do think that when you it's not necessarily that Final Fantasy X guides you through the entire world in a linear fashion. While that is something that I enjoy a little bit more. I enjoy linearity in games a lot. I know, but I think when you remove that, you remove a lot of almost like the visual language of the world. And what I mean to clarify that, you ever see that YouTube channel Every Frame a Painting? You ever heard
No,
of it?
actually, I haven't.
It's really phenomenal YouTube channel. I think you'd enjoy it, Rick. It's a YouTube channel that breaks down scenes in movies and whatnot, and in a really like interesting level. Like he did one video essay on like who wins the scene, and it was from Silence of the Lambs, and they were talking about how they use different camera angles, so whoever is winning the argument, the camera angle has a subtle visual representation of how like who's winning the argument type of thing, which is cool. So he did one on Jackie Chan, and this ties into 10 too, I promise. And in Jackie Chan's movies, and I think in good action cinema, um, when you don't have almost like establishing shots, it makes it harder for the audience to follow the action. So in a lot of modern American action movies, or even just, even older like American action movies, you generally see a camera shot of someone saying shooting a gun, and then you'll see a reaction shot of someone getting shot by the person who just shot the gun, right? But they don't appear in the same frame. So when you are watching the movie, you have no idea where they are in a visual space to each other. Like, is this person a mile away from them when they shoot? Are they right up front? Like, are they 5 feet away? Are they up close and personal? Like, where's the relationship to this other than I just see this person get shot and this person shoot and this person get shot? And Jackie Chan, he did a whole thing where like in Jackie Chan's movies, there's a lot of wide shots so you can see the entire layout and the architecture of the fight scene, so you can you get a feeling of being in the space with Jackie and his opponent, even though you're not there, because the camera takes time to establish the area as they traverse up and down it. They'll even have shots where, like, say he uses it as an example in the video where Jackie's about to kick a dude down like a spiral staircase, right? The shot right before that, though, Jackie and the opponent are on the right hand side of the screen, and like 2/3 of the frame are taken up by the staircase. So you are already painting in the audience's mind, like, that where that staircase is in relation to where they are fighting. So when you get a close up shot of Jackie kicking the dude in the chest, then another shot of the dude flying, and then a wide shot of him going down the stairs, you know exactly where everything is in context of that fight scene, if that makes sense. Now, to relate that over to Final Fantasy X 2, because you're just fast traveling from point to point to point to point, all these points don't, like, I have no relation as to their context to each other anymore. I don't like traveling from Besaid all the way up, like up north to like Xanarkand or whatever. It just feels like there's like they don't feel like they're part of a connected world. It feels like I'm just hopping from airport to airport. And I think that kind of ruins a little bit of the world building and a little bit of the immersion of the world. I'm not saying you have to do things linearly, but I do think that by not having more elements where you get to see how the world connects to each other and how the world interacts with each other, as opposed to just hopping from airport to airport, you do a little bit of disservice with Spira in this, because Spira is different now than it used to be. You said so yourself, Rick. It's no longer this world that every 10 years, if they're lucky, gets destroyed. You have this new society that it almost feels weird to explore, because unless you decide to do the pilgrimage over again in every chapter like 4 or 5 times and just redo that 4 or 5 times, you're not going to see everything. You don't know where things are going to be at, and exploring it I don't know. It feels much more disjointed to me. And I think that's where the game, I think, there's a fair criticism where, because you're just kind of location hopping, you don't get the same broader picture. You're not getting a wide shot. If we're using the Jackie Chan lingo here, we're not getting a wide shot of the events. You're only getting very close up shots of like a kick to the chest or a punch to the face,
Sure. I would argue that that does not detract from world building. However, what I will not argue is that it does give that. You said different airports. I think of it as like vignettes, just different vignettes like Saturday, and is that Saturday in the Park? No, it's Company that's got the different vignettes, that musical. Or like probably what they were going for, like a Saturday morning cartoon, Monster a Week cartoon. Sailor Moon, I mean, Sailor Moon was a Monster a Week kind of show. um, Similar feeling to that, where every location is kind of its own contained thing for a lot of the game until it comes to the main plot, and then sometimes it's not. That's totally valid. Yeah, I mean, again, that comes down to, do you have the tolerance for that, or do you prefer not? Nothing wrong with that.
I don't know. I guess I just that's fair. I guess maybe it is just a preference thing. I don't know. It to me it just doesn't. It makes the world feel less full when you do it this way. I'm not saying
Sure.
I like location hopping couldn't be done well, but I think the way it's done in this, it does. It feels like it doesn't feel like the events are connected to each other. They're telling me they're connected, but it never fully feels like they're connected. Like with the factions in this world, right? Whether it's what are they called? I have them. The Youth League, New Yevon, and the Machine faction. Um, I understand the Youth League and New Yevon are at odds with each other, and you see a couple moments where they're fighting each other, but for the most part it feels very kind of like haphazardly, like that they I guess those are the only parts of the game that actually feels like there's a problem going on, right? But when they sorry, I'm doing a poor job describing this. One of the major plot points in this game is that they need to bring unity because the world in the power vacuum that's left over by the Yevon religion pretty much being destroyed in Final Fantasy X, you have these three leagues vying for power, and they posit that this world is like split up. Like some people are siding with the Youth League, and others are siding with you, Yevon. But outside of those cutscenes, it never feels like there's actually like any factions. You have the base for each faction, and then like the areas where there's actual some combat, like some conflict between these factions. But outside of that area, there doesn't feel like the rest of the world is at odds with each other. It feels like it's just going on its merry way. And I think, I don't know if that's because of the airport hopping, as I called it, or whatnot, but it just nothing. The narratively, like the sections of the world don't feel as well connected as other Final Fantasies.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I'm not arguing. Look, I Final Fantasy X does a similar approach to world map travel, where you just get on the ship and you pick where to go. I'm not saying that's my preferred way.
Well,
One of the reasons why Clair Obscur is such a slam dunk for me is it brings back the world map of like the late SNES and PlayStation era
I still need
JRPGs.
to play Clair Obscur. I've heard nothing but good things.
It's extraordinarily good, man.
Well,
You would love it.
real quick, I will say the reason it works for me in Final 10 is because you don't get that airship hopping until later on in the game when you've had time to build the whole world up. You've already seen the wide shot of the world, and now you get to hop around the frame, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. In 10-2, there is no wide shot. You just start exploring around. But
Yeah, they
anyway,
expect you to remember the wide shot.
and I think that's where it comes down to a me problem. That's exactly it. They expect you to remember the wide shot. Um, so I don't know. I don't have anything more to complain about it. I appreciate you pushing back on it. I'm realizing how much of this is a me problem.
I want to be clear. The pushing back I'm doing is mostly just me expressing
Oh,
why
I
I think it
consider it out
works
of
for
love.
me. Yeah, like I'm not telling you. I'm trying to go to great lengths to emphasize that there is no wrong answer here, and you can dislike what I like, and that's fine. You know.
No, I didn't take it any other way. I'm enjoying this. I don't have much more to add to the gameplay. We've talked about traversal around the world. We've talked about the platforming. Is there anything else? And we've talked about the battle system and how the dress sphere stuff works. Is there anything else you want to touch on with the gameplay though before we move on?
No, sir. I'm ready to go.
All right. I want to then move on to overall presentation. That's visuals, that's sound, that's music. And normally I save that for the end, but I think I've mentioned before, I'm not the best at, breaking down this element. So I want to save the kind of story and other stuff for the end of the episode. So I'll throw it over to you, Rick, first. I always tend to start off with these and then make myself sound dumb. So I want to send it off to someone who's much better at articulating their feelings on this type of stuff. So what are your thoughts? You can pick either or, whether it's or you can pick whichever you want to start with. Visuals, music. What do you got?
Oh, I mean, if you're letting me articulate my views,
By all means.
we could do visuals first since you brought it up. Look, I'm not going to be somebody that says, "Look at how they massacred my boy" with the HD remaster. I think, at least for 10.2 specifically, I think it looks okay. There are a couple of times where the faces look bizarre and ghoulish. I'm specifically thinking of the infamous line where Riku is solving the puzzle and just yells "monkey," and her eyes have this weird, distorted, sunken look. A lot of the time, the HD remaster, they look adorable. They look really nice. Do I prefer it on a CRT? Yes, always. 100% of the time on a CRT with original hardware. That's just how I prefer it. But the HD remaster looks passable. And indeed, with all the colors that 10 and 10.2's world has, they really pop. They really look good. I am a big fan of the outfit redesigns. I think it reflects Yuna's self-discovery into herself as a whole human being in her own right. That kind of transition from demure and self-unsure person with the weight of the world placed upon them by the father into a self-realized unit of autonomy. And she even goes through a micro version of that arc in this game itself. I think the redesign looks great. I love her outfit. I love Riku's outfit, even though, people say it's fan servicey. Whatever. I
Yeah,
like it.
it's fan servicey, but Riku's awesome.
I like it. It's fine. I mean, it took everything from 10 that looked good too. And they put it into 10.2. I think it looks great. CRT is, maybe a little bit better if we're really going to get in the weeds, but most of the time it looks beautiful in this HD remaster too. And we already said about the dress spheres. Everybody's got their own unique costume. I love that touch. That is such a nice touch. Super great. I love it.
I love the visual look of this game a lot as well. Though, so apparently one of the reasons that the HD remaster, at least for 10, apparently 10.2 they still had it, but the Square lost the source code for 10.
Okay.
So they had to recreate a lot of that stuff from scratch, which is why a lot of that does not look quite as good as everyone remembers it. But 10.2, for some reason, they had the source code. So that's why, like, 10.2, the HD remaster looks better than 10. From what I heard, I have not personally experienced it. I own the HD remaster, but I actually played my original copy on I got a retro tank, and I was using that to upscale it, and I streamed a bunch of my playthrough of 10.2. And it looks great, man. I love it. The colors are vibrant. There's a huge difference in the character models between this and 10. Like, there was the 2 years you could see Square really did a good job, like, learning more about the PlayStation hardware and, like, being able to get more out of it. It really looks good.
Yeah, I do have a question. Since you played the original, I haven't played the original since I was a kid. But in the HD remaster, it's really stunning compared to 10, how much more expressive the facial animations, in particular around the eyes, look. Is that the same on the on the OG hardware?
I watching the what's his face's video. I'm so bad at Brando's video. I saw the same thing you did, because he used the HD remake, excuse me, for his video capture. I don't remember the faces looking that expressive, but I honestly also don't know if I just wasn't paying attention enough. So, like, I remember thinking the character models looked really good. Like, I thought they were really detailed. Like, even the hair looked really good. The like, the detail and all the clothing. Yes, once again, fan servicey. Yuna's showing a decent amount of cleavage, and obviously, what's her face? Fucking the lady.
Riku?
Not Riku, the enemy.
Kane? Oh, LeBlanc.
LeBlanc. She's nothing but cleavage. But I think, like, the outfits all look detailed. I thought the outfits all looked good despite the fan servicey stuff. Like, it just, everything looked really great. I don't remember the facial animations. It looked super expressive in his video. So I you know what? I will have to go back and like watch some, whether it's online or through my own copy, like were they always that expressive, or is it just the HD remake?
I'd be interested in finding out the answer because they do look very expressive in the remake.
They definitely do. It looks good. I also really like the overall. What's the name of their airship? The Gullwings airship. Why can't I remember it?
The
Do you remember?
Celsius.
Is it the Celsius? I love how the Celsius looks. I love the way the bridge looks. I love the silly bar that's in the middle of it, that you're supposed, like, there's a bar downstairs and you have all the beds on the balcony. Like, the layout of that's just so silly. Like, there's no privacy up there. You're just sleeping above a bar with a dude
The
that
hype fellow just keeps his eye on you.
me
Can I come up
Shuna,
and help you?
me Shuna. I love his voice so much.
Sleep tight.
Yeah. Can I? Would you like a screwdriver to help you for a nightcap? Me Shuna. The SH thing just killed me so much. I loved his voice so much. Oh, it's so amusing. But yeah, I loved that. I loved how, like, if you go down to the engine room in every chapter, there's always items there. Like, there was a lot of care built in the airship, which makes sense because you're on it a lot. But yeah, I really like that. The world still looks good. I do like that. I do like that with this game compared to other Final Fantasies. Instead of going for like a high fantasy type of thing, they go like Southeast Asian type of thing, which is very different than what they've done previously. And I like how they continue. Obviously, it would continue, and it's a sequel to 10, but it looks great. The game still looks great. I still think 10 is one of the better looking games on the PS2, even though it's one of the earlier games on the PS2. And I understand 10.2 is in 2003, but still they reused a lot of the assets.
Yeah, here. I agree. I love the design of 10. I love the design of 10 too.
I want to move on then to the music and whatnot. I would say the sound, but all I can hear in my head is me Shuna. That's the only sound effect that is stuck in my head anymore. But the music for this game, I know you had a lot to say on it, Rick. Or we were talking a bit off mic how much you enjoy the soundtrack for this. I really liked it too. It nothing necessarily 100% stood out to me other than like Eternity. I really enjoyed, and obviously you have that, the classic pop ballad, 1,000 Words, that the game starts with.
No. It starts with Real Emotion. 1,000 Words
yes,
comes later.
Yes, you're right. My apologies. 1,000 Words is later on. 1,000 Words is the concert that unifies the world, right?
Yes, and it's one of the two J-pop songs in there that I don't like. The other one that I do like being Real Emotion. So I was like, no. Let's credit where it's due.
1,000 Words is a little cheesy for sure. I don't
like that part in the story. It it's campy. I get it, but like, oh geez, I just want it to be over with every time.
I mean, because that whole thing is like, we can show the world the folly of them hating each other with a concert. And I'm like, oh, if only the real world was that simple.
Yeah. Maybe we're just jaded. There's a great interview that I saw come up on YouTube Shorts a couple times, or Instagram Reels or whatever, of Frank Zappa being interviewed on like this news station, and they're like, Mr. Zappa, are there any rock lyrics that you would like your children not to hear, that you would keep from them? And without missing a beat, he goes, "We are the world."
Oh, fuck!
It's so funny. It's so good.
He was a salty man. He was. I don't blame him though, but it's. I've listened to a few of his old interviews, and it's wild some of the stuff he was saying even back then.
This game soundtrack though, you folks might be surprised to hear that it's got lineage with The Bouncer on PS2, but it does.
Oh, really?
Noriko Matsueda and Takahito Eguchi were the composing team, and they worked together quite a bit. Like, they worked together on The Bouncer. They worked together. I don't think it was Front Mission. One of them worked on Front Mission. One of them worked on Chrono Trigger for like one song. One of them worked on a bunch of Sonic stuff, and I think some Super Monkey Ball. And it baffles me that this soundtrack gets left out of the best Final Fantasy soundtracks discussion. And I'm not making a case for saying that it is the best or it's my favorite, the best, whatever that even means, or that it's my favorite. It's not my favorite. That still goes to 9. However, like if we're just, doing top 3, top 5, this and 13 should absolutely be in the conversation. The fact that Uematsu wasn't involved and that it's so stylistically different from his typical language is, I think, why it gets looked away from. And because, 6 has Dancing Mad, 7's got One Winged Angel, 8's got Everything, and 10's got Two Xanarkand. I get it. However, I pulled up a playlist of 10-2's tracks earlier today, and seriously, one out of every 3 clicks that I did just had me making a stank face. Like this, it's so funky and dirty and stylistic. And truly, I think it does that better than the more orchestral or intimate tracks on here, which is fine. But the atmospheric kind of funk tinged, city pop tinged kind of deal. This is like Masayoshi Takanaka pilled. Uh, it's like the Chocobo track on this
Mhm.
is so in the pocket. The Machine Faction track, it's so funky and good. Even the Gull Wings track is so funky and good. Yuna's theme isn't like quite as funky, but it's so upbeat and happy and catchy. It's just
Mhm.
got so much pep and energy, and of course, like Real Emotion is such a banger. So good. What an opening.
I think for me, what this game, I think the reason it sticks out too is that the soundtrack very much to me is it's meant to reinforce the world as opposed to stand out. Like I love Uematsu's music, and I actually prefer music that I can hear the melody in my head. But that's like, older games have that stronger melody for, there was a limitation. They wanted you to be able to remember the music because they couldn't like build as, complex arrangements in the old hardware, right? Now they could do whatever. And so like this game, since they could just play a recording on it, the composers could be had a little bit more freedom with it. I mean, games have been doing this for a while, and I'm not saying this is a brand new thing. Like even on the PS1, the Final Fantasy games had the capability of it. But I feel like this game, the music reinforces the world as opposed to stand out from it, and that's not a bad thing. I
Yeah,
like.
totally.
I think specifically the Celsius music I hear in my head all the time, which kind of goes against what I was saying. But it's not like it's a tune that I would like go to out of my way to listen to, but it creates a vibe, and it creates a vibe for you in whichever zone you're in. So like when I hear the Celsius music, that do 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 or whatever, I think that's Celsius if I remember correctly. I hear that and I'm like, oh, I remember all my emotions now from when I was playing the game in this specific spot. Or if I go to a different zone and hear the music from there, like you can remember the zone and the vibes from it, even if you don't necessarily remember like the melody later on, right? Like it's not like you'd be able to necessarily always hum it right afterwards, but you remember the feeling it gives you, and it reinforces the world as opposed to standing out from it. And I like that. I like that. I like it when games do that. And while I think that's what I was telling you off mic, Rick, why sometimes it's harder for me to talk about music in games. It's because now, since games aren't giving me melodies, I can like hooky melodies that I can like recall, it's harder for me to describe why I like it other than they just create a
Sure.
vibe that I enjoy.
And sometimes that's all you need to say too, to be clear. Um, I still think it's a cool idea what you're cooking up. But I said this in my essay on 10.2, which is something that I didn't plug for an hour and a half now. I did an essay on 10.2 for my show. I don't often do solo episodes, but I wrote an essay. It turned out to be 45 minutes long, defending 10.2. And one of the things that I said was, exactly what you just said. This society now has permission to feel optimism and joy without any guilt or burden attached to it. This is for the first time they are free. And what does that unbridled hopefulness sound like? And you get this soundtrack. It's upbeat, it's peppy. Like you said, it's got hooks that has you humming it, all the time. Even that menu music that is a bit more reflective and it's just piano. It's still how to phrase it, it still has a forward looking character to it. It's not something that is tinged with reflectiveness, with this sort of languid sadness that you get into Xanarkand, right? That is, in some ways, that's the perfect JRPG theme to Xanarkand, but it
Yeah.
is just dripping with a bitter nostalgia, right? A reflecting on the past at what you have lost. This doesn't have that. This is forward thinking. This is hopeful for the future because this society gets to feel that for the first time. I don't know. Again, I think, it is perfectly valid to just say this music wasn't to my taste, so I wasn't too into it. Just as it's valid to say, I like the character melodies of Uematsu. Totally valid. I do too. But, I also like the atmospheric and kind of groove based stuff of 13 and 10.2. And 10.2 in particular, it's just so fun.
It's a really fun soundtrack. I mean, yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think actually you kind of touched on something that I wanted to be our next topic is just like the themes of the game, right? And we can kind of use that to talk about like the story and the themes and every kind of like together. But before we move on to that, is there anything else on the music that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I shouted out the Chocobo and the Machine Faction theme. Real Emotion is a banger. Yeah, no, it's a good soundtrack.
All right. So we're going to move on to the story section of this game, and I will put that spoiler wall up here for those who are curious if they haven't played this game and you want to know if you don't want to know the story, excuse me, this is your stopping point. Come on back once you finish the game. It's actually a pretty short game. Like maybe to grind with the side quests so you can get high enough, it takes a little bit. But I had gotten towards the end of chapter 5 in about like 16, 17 hours. Like it's a relatively short game, all things considered, especially for a JRPG. Um, the I think real quick, Rick. I think what would be a good idea that as we dive into the story here, just to give a quick synopsis of the plot points, and then we can dissect what we want to from there. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Just that way everyone following along has a basis for like what we're talking about instead of just kind of jumping around. So the general plot of this, I already talked about the setup at the beginning of the game, or the beginning of the game, sorry, the beginning of the episode of why Yuna's going on this, like why she's sphere hunting, because she saw a sphere and in it like a memory sphere, and in that recording she saw someone that looked like Titus. I always said Titus when I first played it. I understand it's Titus. Titus still sounds better to me, but that's I I've been it's been hard for me to switch over to the correct pronunciation. Uh,
Yeah, I'm with you. I switched over for this. I won't switch over for 9, but I could do a
how
Titus if I get to keep
how do you
Zidane.
for nine? Do you pronounce Zidane or Zidane?
I say Zidane. It's supposed to be Zidane. It's supposed to be Aiko, not Aiko. But I'm keeping that.
All right, Zidane works better anyway. I'm sorry, Zidane sound like I think of Zinedine Zidane, that French soccer player that
Right,
headbutted the dude,
right.
and I don't need that in my life. No, so with Yuna, she is hunting around she's hunting spheres with the gull wings, which are Riku, Pain, her, and also Riku's like Albed family, I guess. Brother is the guy who kind of pilots the ship, and he's unhinged in this game, and I love him.
Yeah, he really wants to sleep with Yuna, who they all acknowledge
Something
is
fierce.
is his blood relative, and
Oh,
it's a
you're
lot.
right, because they're Riku and her are cousins. So if brother wants to sleep with her, oh, that's just creepy.
And it's just some of the most bizarre line readings too.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just his screech is just crazy. Yeah, all of his line readings are just cuckoo bananas. I love them, but they're cuckoo bananas. Anyway, so you are hunting around the Spira for finding spears because Yuna wants to find out more about whoever this Titus lookalike is. And while searching for all these spheres, you also are kind of dealing with the, like, kind of almost in the background, but it's still kind of, it's pushing the plot forward of that power struggle we mentioned before between the different factions. You get to choose a side as to like which faction you want to ally yourself with. I believe technically, if you want to get 100%, you need to ally yourself with the Youth League.
Yep.
I believe New Yevon, you don't want to do that. You want to ally yourself with the Youth League, and the plot that eventually gets revealed is that you find this ultra powerful mech, kind of almost like, it looks like, reminds me of like one of the weapons from Final Fantasy VII, right? You know, like Ultima weapon or Ruby weapon. It kind of visually
Totally.
kind of reminds me of that a little bit. But it's this ultra powerful weapon called Vegnagun, and you're worried about people trying to get it, that they can use it for evil, right? Well, once you discover that, you also discover that there is this guy named, oh my gosh, I forget the dude's name.
The Titus lookalike?
The Titus lookalike, yes.
Shuyin.
Shuyin, yes. And he, I'm just going to say what happens because I can't remember exactly how he gets how you get introduced to this, is to the events that actually happen. But for basically what it is that you see Shuyin was a former like soldier, right? He was a former soldier of Bavel, or was it Xanarkand? I think it was Xanarkand, and he was in love with this woman named Len, and he was trying to, I think he ended up trying to go in, and he was tired of the war or something like that, and he wanted to go and destroy Vegnagun himself, but Len came in, and then they end up both getting gunned down by Xanarkand soldiers or Bavel soldiers. I forget which it is.
Sort of. Len got kind of forced into the war. I can't remember if she was a
She's
summoner,
a summoner, yeah.
and got forced onto the front lines, or if she was like forced into being a summoner for battle, because summoners did also do battle. But Shuyin tried to get a hold of Vegnagun to use against Bavel to end this whole thing, because he didn't want Len to get involved and
That's what it
potentially
was.
die.
Mm-hmm. And well, she ends up kind of like following him into with Vegnagun, and they both get trapped there and gunned down. Like they both get murdered by soldiers straight up. And she is able to move on. I guess she's able to pass, I believe it, or she's able to move on, but Shuyin is not able to, and he vows revenge, and he hates war and everything. So when Sin gets defeated and all these factions are starting to vie for power, Shuyin comes, like almost like a spirit comes around. He's like, these humans haven't learned anything, and are just pissed off. So he wants to bring Vegnagun back so that way he can destroy all of humanity, because he's just so mad at humans still fighting and infighting and going to war and all this other stuff. So that's kind of like that's the main villain of the game. You ultimately end up stopping him. He is able to come to peace because like the ghost of Len meets kind of this ghost of Shuyin, and they are both able to pass on peacefully. And that's, in a very short, in terms of like synopsis, that's a very short nutshell. There's a lot of character growth in this. I'm not trying to say that's all that happened. I'm going to use this as a jumping off point, Rick, for some of my thoughts on like the story, I guess, and what I was saying before, how it's like a math problem that doesn't like show its work. But am I missing any plot beats that you think I should touch on before I kind of go into those thoughts?
Just two right away that I think are interesting. One, the Bavel Xanarkand War is, I'm pretty sure canonically, how Xanarkand got destroyed and how Dream Xanarkand came about. And indeed, like there is some evidence to suggest that Titus as a dream incarnate was based on Shuyin.
Yes.
Like I don't know if that's canon, but there's evidence for that too. You forgot to mention, while Shuyin was stewing for thousands of years in the Den of Woe, no notes on that name. The way that he came back to try to get Vegnagun to bring down humanity was by spirit possessing Nuge and then Barreleye just hopping from body to body, which is admittedly a silly plot point. Yes, yeah. Kind of a silly plot point.
Well, no, but that's actually a super important plot point, because the faction leaders were all friends with each other along with Pain, And when Shu Yin possesses one of them and causes people start getting shot, and those three are the only people who are left alive, I believe. And it's Pain and the other three faction leaders, I believe, is like what happens. But Pain for some
Yeah.
reason doesn't remember it. I forget why though. Like she
I
doesn't
don't
really
remember
talk
either.
about
I
it.
know. No, I think Pain does remember. She just because that's why she's with the Gull Wings. She's searching for, more answers to what happened that day. I don't remember why she doesn't talk about it. I think she's just introverted person. And at one point she says something to the effect of like, you should stop asking me about it because I asked you and you're my friend and we respect each other. That should be enough of a reason for you or something. I don't quite
Yeah,
remember, to be
that
perfectly honest.
there is a bunch of moments in this game that I think have genuinely good character points that like get me, like they got me in the feels, but the lead up to them felt so sudden. That was
Sure.
one of them. That was one of them where it's like it's a really like good like it's a really good conversation between friends. Like if you're my friend, you would like respect my wishes and stuff like that. Like so what I was trying to say before with the themes and stuff like this, what I love about this game was we touched on at the beginning how it sets up the world, how there's a power vacuum and these factions are vying for power. I also love that this game in a lot of ways is about Yuna's grief, and it's about her coming to grips with like her learning to be herself again. And when I was thinking about this, I loved how it set it up, because if you think about it from Yuna's perspective, right, like the events of Final 10 happened 2 years prior to the events of this game, and Yuna was a summoner whose entire life was revolved around the fact that she knew she was going to sacrifice herself for the greater good to defeat sin, right? That is what she knew she was going to do. She understood the assignment, as the kids say. um and she gets all the way up there only to then have Titus not only save her, but and not only save her, but also help them kill sin. But the price of it is that Titus is now no longer with them, right? No longer with her. So she no longer has the purpose that she had spent a large portion of her life up to that point, like learn, like, like becoming a summoner is no easy feat, I would assume, right? So her identity as a summoner is gone. Her identity through her religion is gone. Her, I mean, I wouldn't say her identity through Titus, because that wouldn't pass the Bechtel test, but like uh her love of her life, like the person she wants to be around the most, who helps stop all this, is gone. So she has to she has to pick up the pieces of herself, and it's only 2 years later that she's finally starting to take steps out from that and be able to kind of like work on the grieving process. And I like, maybe something could have happened within those 2 years, but this is where the game picks up, and that's totally fine. So this game, to me, like the narrative that Yuna goes through, the arc that Yuna goes through, very much feels like her trying to come to grips like with the loss of what she used to be, and how she has to find herself again in a new form. She can't be Yuna the summoner anymore. She's going to be a new Yuna, and kind of like the dress spheres are kind of like a good gameplay representation of that, of like changing who you are to find who you're ultimately meant to be. um and I love that. I love that that kind of feels like the narrative they're trying to go for. And they even reflect that with this whole Shuyan thing, because he looks like Titus. So now she's going on this journey reflecting on Titus, and Titus and sorry, Shuyan and Len's story of like coming to acceptance with their fate and being able to move on together. It kind of resembles what they're trying to do with Yuna's arc, where she has to like come to grips with Titus's death, and she has to learn to move on as well. And she can kind of see that same, like that it almost is like a, not a mirror image, but almost like an echo of what she's going through with the story of Shuyan and Len. And I love that. I love the correlation between the two, and like how it's kind of like a, almost like a mirror image of what she's going through, but in a slightly different context. So they set all this stuff up with this really cool idea for Yuna's story arc, and the world building that is the backdrop to it. And she even has a really great monologue at the end of the game, which once again I did not beat it, but I did watch a long play to get to the stuff that I didn't get to for my playthrough. Um, when they're trying to fight Shuyin at the very end of the game, the one of the leaders, I forget who it is, I think it's Nuge, um, basically is willing to sacrifice himself in order to take out Gun and Shuyin. And Yuna has a wonderful monologue talking about how, like, I'm tired of people just like thinking death is the only way out of this. Like, I'm paraphrasing it. She talked about, like, I'm tired of people just sacrificing themselves for without even trying something else. And she talks about how sad it was that in 10 you had to kill the Aeons, all the Aeons that trusted you and like you took care of, you had this relationship with, and you had to take them all out one by one. And she talks about how like it feels like this is her moment to that she's been wrestling with for 2 years, and it's all coming out. And then you fight Shuyin, and no one actually has to die, and it's a really beautiful story arc that I think they kind of cut it off at the knees if you get the good ending where Tidus comes back, because it kind of defeats the purpose of her character arc of her finding herself. That they
Oh, call it what it is. It's a slap in the face. It is
Yeah.
easily the worst thing about this game that they decided to functionally ruin every good bit of character development and lore development that they had been building across two games. It is such a terrible decision.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's frustrating that if you want a better ending for the game, you want to get the quote unquote bad ending. Like where Tidus doesn't come back, where it doesn't give you the option to bring Tidus back.
True, but that's they want to service the fans in more ways than one. They want the fans to be happy. I think it's cowardly. There is another. Oh, I don't want to spoil it. There's another classic JRPG that often gets called one of the best of all time that is on a system from 2 gens prior to this that you can revive a dead main character. And I think that's cowardly there too. Have faith in your audience. Allow them to grieve. It's okay.
And if anything, you can use this game as not a template, but like, one the what's the line from Ted Lasso? They're like, don't forget, like, nothing like after at the end of season 1 something sad happens, and I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but like, it's okay to feel sad, that there's nothing I can say that's going to make you feel better, but look around you, and there's something much worse than what you're feeling now, and that's being sad and alone. And like, showing your audience how to like grieve in solidarity with, like, you can see a character and maybe relate it to something in your own life. You're no longer grieving alone, because it's clear that whoever made this piece of art also felt something similar. And so now you no longer feel like you're grieving alone. And that, like, the game could have done that in such a perfect, beautiful message. And yeah, it's such a slap in the face. I think there's no other, like, yeah, no sugarcoating. You're right, Rick. Like, it really cuts it out. It cuts the knees out from under it, and it really takes what is a beautiful story arc and just ruins it.
That, and think of how narratively incoherent it is with the rest of the game's themes. 10 and 10-2 circle around this idea of loss and acceptance and rebirth anew. Spira continually was in a cycle of death. Now they are reborn. They are free from their previous shackles. They can now thrive as a new version of themselves. This mirrors Yuna's character arc too. She is in many ways reborn. With Tidus being brought back, what they're effectively saying is, let me focus my thoughts here. They're swimming too much. What they're effectively saying is that the best possible scenario is reuniting with the past that you lost. In other words, constant looking back and not looking forward to the future, casting aside growth for comfort. That is narratively incoherent, and it goes against everything they've set up. Again, I mean, I throughout this episode, I kept waiting to say, like, yeah, the 100%ing is the worst part of this game, but that's not true. That's the second worst part. The worst part is this terrible ending, and then they ruined it even further with a 2.5 novella, light novella audio drama
Yep.
that further, like, Tidus and Yuna get shipwrecked on a beach, and Tidus explodes like 3 different times, but
by
I think they're
kicking a
just
bomb he
dreams.
thought was a blitz ball.
It's so funny. It's so stupid, dude. Even like nobody likes those. I nobody likes those. But yeah, dude, this ending sucks. And I agree with you. The standard ending that you get by not trying to get the good ending is the best. I think the best one for me is, isn't there a variation of this ending where like, yeah, you get offered to see, is this maybe the quote unquote bad ending
Yes.
that you mentioned? You get offered to like have him return and you just say no.
Well, the good ending is that you get the offer and you can choose yes or no. And if you choose yes, then Titus comes back. And if you choose no, Una basically says no, like I've basically kind of the no response is I've come to peace with this, which maybe you
That's
could
the
make.
money.
Yeah, then I think that would have been better if you didn't give the players that choice. Like you could make the argument by giving the players the choice, it allows the players to pick how they want to grieve, pick how they want to grow, or pick how they want to feel the story. But at the same time, I feel like if you wanted to bring Titus back, you could have told a story that serviced that ending better, that the conclusion to the story would have fit. But you didn't tell a story that way. You told a story about Una learning who she is as a person again, learning to get over what she lost and learning to find something new to live on for. And that's the story you chose to tell, excuse me. And Titus coming back, like we've said a bunch of times, just completely negates that. If you wanted Titus to come back, you needed to tell a different story, because I do think they could have done something with Titus coming back where the ending would have been impactful and it would have been this beautiful reunion and this and that. But that's not the story you told throughout the rest of the game. They're completely at odds with each other, like you said. Um, and to tie it in with what I was saying before with the math problem analogy I was using, it very much feels like when they're telling this, like Yuna's character arc, it very much feels like you have the intro where they go on a mission. You might have a few like inner head monologues, like where she's talking to herself in the narration type of thing. But it doesn't happen too often throughout the game. It happens once in a while, and it's just her kind of reflecting on missing Titus, and that happens. But I don't think it happens quite enough, because then the next part of the character arc is her having that, like the next big character jump, I should say, is that monologue I was talking about. At least to me, like all the stuff I mentioned before about like her looking at Shuyin and Len as an analogy for her and Titus and stuff like that. That's all stuff that like I read into after thinking more about it. And I think that's what the developers intended, but it's not broadcast very well. I think that's where my issue with how the story was presented is comes in, where I think the story itself is beautiful, with the exception of the fucked up ending, which you can not technically get if you play it a specific way. But the story itself that they wanted to tell, and how even some of the stuff they wrote in is amazing, like really great world setup and character development and all that stuff. But it's almost like you told the inciting incident and then the conclusion, and you missed all the rising action. That's how it kind of felt to me when I played it.
This is going to be one of those times where I have to simply just I have to make it known that I just can't give a good argument, because I just, I haven't played this completely for too long. My recollection of this is that Yuna's character growth does occur, but it's subtle, and it's in the character building moments where she slowly starts to trust herself as an independent being and stops looking to Riku particularly, but Riku in pain, for everything, for reassurance and for comfort. That's my recollection. But again, it's been so long that I can't cite it. So you may be right, or we both may be right. I don't know, but I can't really cite anything clearer than that, unfortunately.
Well, you may be right. I may be crazy, but I just might be the lunatic you're looking for, you know? But
No, I mean, you laying it out that way doesn't strike me as unbelievable.
mm. I'd be curious if you do end up replaying it at some point. I'd be curious to see if you agree with my pacing issues. Like, is it another Josh problem, or maybe is it like do you agree that it's more than just me not playing 10 right before playing this type of thing?
Well,
Because
no, there definitely are pacing issues. What I just now we're specifically talking about Yuna's growth from like up to that monologue. That's what I don't remember.
Oh, I think to me that to me is just the growth was too subtle for it. I think there is like you're right. There is actually I remember a distinct moment where Yuna starts becoming more decisive, like on the airship and everything, and she starts making decisions. But it feels really late in the game, and it doesn't feel like it. You know how like in sometimes like if Yuna's going from pure timid to then actually being able to have confidence to make decisions herself, you might see like a couple things here and there, you know, like where she'll make one decision and then it turns out okay, and then she starts building confidence in herself, and then maybe she'll make a decision where it doesn't work out, and then she has a crisis of confidence and stuff like that, where you
Hmm.
see, but when you see her growing, but there's really none of that in the game. There is the inciting incident of finding that sphere of Shuyin and wanting to learn more, and then it's you see Yuna slowly like getting a little bit of confidence until all of a sudden she's like, "No, I'm making decisions," and it doesn't feel like there's a build up to it.
Sure.
It's just that she suddenly decided, "No, I'm making decisions," and then honestly a really great monologue. Like I remember watching it and her talking about having to kill the Aeons was like really heartbreaking. Really good moment in the game.
And
Um,
this isn't me giving the developer or the writers a pass or anything. It's just an observation. It's really difficult to balance those scales of wanting to be like a Saturday morning magical girl campy anime Charlie's Angels, which how did we go 2 hours without mentioning Charlie's Angels?
oh my
Um,
god, yeah, that was a huge influence as well.
yeah, but like it's tough to strike that balance between Charlie's Angels, magical girl, Saturday morning cartoon, with genuine reflective human growth that is sincere and not schlocky. That's tough to balance. And I mean, I'm on the spot podcaster brain. I don't have any examples as to what does it well. I'm sure there are, but I can't think of any at the moment.
I feel like a
That's
lot
not
of
me.
animes kind of do that. Like I think for some reason I'm thinking Trigun, where Trigun's very slapstick, but
Ooh,
it's got like very serious moments that I think work pretty well. But it's been a minute since I've watched it too, so I don't know.
I love that anime so much.
It's a great anime. I that anime was like, not to get too sidetracked, but that anime, you know how like the end of the episodes there's like a monologue or a poem that Vash the Stampede reads over top of
Mhm.
it. I remember when I first watched it, that was like, you know, my emo heart ate that shit up. I'm like, I'm so deep. Look at hear all these deep thoughts at the end of those episodes. Like everything about that appealed to me. I have to rewatch it to see if I still enjoy the show, but I loved it a lot.
Hey, you know what? You want to share something emo? I will too. One of the composers on this game, and I am blanking as to which one it is. I think it's Takahito Iguchi. Did the music for an anime called DN Angel, which is also like an emo like anime manga that I read a little bit in 8th grade, and also thought that I was super deep and uh, more mature than the rest of my peers.
I feel like there's an element of like if I I feel like people like us who started getting into like, I don't know, maybe I'm reading more into this than it's actually there, but like, you know, we like to look at our media critically. I would argue you're better at it than I am, but like we both like to look at it and dissect it and break down why we like it and really examine it. And I feel like that stems all the way back to then, where we're just trying to be teenagers who are deep, who want to show off how deep emotions we have. Like I remember being really like, I still love the show, but like Cowboy Bebop, right? I love the soundtrack for that show. Yoko Kanno, fantastic like soundtrack. I remember being like, you know, feeling so sophisticated because it was jazzy. I'm like, look at me, I listen to jazz, even though that's like a very hyper specific style of jazz that's not indicative of the rest of it. But in my mind, not understanding all that, I'm like, I'm so smart. I listen to jazz, and it was just Cowboy Bebop. That's all it was. I wasn't like listening to classics or anything like that. No offense to Yoko Kanno, I still love that soundtrack, but it's not like I actually knew jazz. I just listened to Cowboy Bebop.
Sure, credit where it's due. The seatbelts are legit. Like they're respected. They're real good. That's a natural part of growing up. The desire to want to show the individual self. It's normal.
wanted to show off how intelligent we are, or feel intelligent. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't have much else to go on for the story or the narrative or themes or anything like that. Is there anything else you would like to touch on, Rick, before we wrap this up?
Just a super duper quick point. I think it's really cool. We mentioned the faction. The machine faction is the Albed. It's a kind of interesting side story wherein Machina are no longer vilified because that was a Yevon thing, and
I
Yevon's
forgot
been
about that.
dismantled.
Yeah,
So now the Albed, the machine faction, are leading machine research. They start calling them machines to get rid of the stigma of Machina. That's neat. But what's particularly cool is the actual power struggle is between New Yevon and the Youth League. Now, the Youth League, of course, I think that's the option that most of us would probably side with in real life. They're the rebels. They want to take down the church. Why is the church trying to safeguard knowledge? This should be public. Power to the people, right? To me, that's the obvious choice, but it's not the interesting one. The interesting choice is New Yevon on the heels of the church's scandal essentially being a sham, deceiving and beguiling and being a duplicitous entity on the people for years and years and years for their own gain, even though it meant lives being lost. New Yevon comes in and they're trying to rebuild one step at a time. I think that's their motto. They actively want to acknowledge the wrongs of the past and move forward in a new positive light. Like that's their whole thing. They're rebuilding the image, and that is a fascinating angle to take, and it's not one that we see often. And I think that has a lot of potential for really interesting and nuanced storytelling. Now, of course, because of the compression of fiction, because JRPGs have a lot of other stuff going on, because this isn't at its heart a political story. It is a personal story, a love story, a development story about friendship. Friendship is a huge theme in this. They don't go too deep into that, but I do think that is a very interesting concept to think about. Like, how would a church, in the light of a rebel group that wants to usurp them, largely with the public support, how could they go about rebuilding themselves, both as a brand, if we want to be cynical about it, and just as an organization of hope? How could they go about doing that? Can it be done? And what are the potentials of further corruption there? I think they don't explore that in this game, not too much, but it is a very cool jumping off point for fan fiction, I guess.
I think that just lends itself to what I was saying before, the point I made, how I think the world they set up is really interesting. And I'm not saying they should have explored this. I don't consider that a bad thing they didn't explore this. Like you said, like the focus of the story is character growth and friendship and a romance and that kind of stuff. But I do really think, as much as I have criticized how they implemented a lot of stuff in this game, I really think they had a lot of phenomenal ideas. Also, something at the very end of the game too, the leaders of those factions, Jipple, Nuge, or is it Jeepal? Jeepal,
I think
maybe?
it's Gipple.
Okay. Gipple, Nuge, and why can't I think of the
Barreleye.
Barreleye, yeah. One of the most shocking moments to me, in all honesty, and maybe it's just because of our current political climate, they all apologize to the citizens. There's a great moment at the end of the game, like once they've peace has been achieved to an extent, like where they're like the factions aren't fighting against each other. They all make a collective speech to Spira, and they say, listen, like, after sin went away, we should have promised that, like, we made a promise that, like, we, the world would be at peace, and we forgot that, and we turned you against each other, and we're sorry for that. And I was so surprised to see that. I've never heard any leader say something like that. I'm not talking about just in America. I mean, the current political climate here in the US is beyond fucked, and this is not the avenue for that. But it is like, I can't picture any leader saying something like that, apologizing to their public, to their constituents for misleading them. And like, it just, I was blown away by that humility. And I understand it's a fictional story and I shouldn't read too much into it, but it was very aspirational almost, where it was like they were willing to look at how they failed their public and apologize for it and pledge to do better. It's a small moment, honestly, a very small moment at the end of the game, but it just really took me by surprise.
Yeah. And Ain't it a shame that it's a fiction, right?
Right? Yeah.
That's I truly cannot imagine that happening today in the current state of affairs.
No, you're right. I can't imagine it either, and it's sad that we can't imagine it. That we live in a world where like people are so afraid of accountability because they don't want to get because they're afraid it won't get them reelected or some shit like that. Which that's a different discussion entirely.
The current political climate is just anathema to what Barreleye and Nuge and Gipple want, which is the good of the people first and foremost, no questions asked. Everything else comes after or is in service of. The system just does not allow that right now.
Exactly.
This is great. I've been waiting 2 hours to get my spot to espouse political views. It's time to make people mad.
That's all right. So the real issue here is that people just don't love America anymore. Oh my God, no, we're not going to go into all that. But it was. I was just blown away by that moment. But yeah, like I said, this game I think sets up a really wonderful story, a wonderful, amazing world. It the gameplay is my issues with the gameplay. I genuinely think are 100% me, with the exception I still think like the airport traveling, as I mentioned before, is a little bit of a problem. But it's so minor. I don't think that would have ruined it for me. Um, I really think that the real major issue with this game, at least to me, is you set up this wonderful story and character arc, and specifically at the end, like regardless of how rushed different portions of it feel, or maybe it doesn't feel paced well enough, that ending just really cuts the knees off or cuts it off at the knees. Sorry. It just, what a wonderful setup, a world to set up. Like really, I wrote it down where they asked really interesting questions, and I'm not entirely satisfied with the method in which they answered. But once you get to the answer, some of it, there's a lot of really good stuff in here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, once again, I don't think that you disliking the battle system or the airport thingy is necessarily a flaw. I just think it's taste, but I agree with you on the ending. I wouldn't even say cut it off at the knees, cut it off at the head.
Well, Rick, I think that's about all I got for this episode. That's all I have to say about the game. To wrap this up, let's just go into final thoughts, and I will give you the last word as you are the guest. And I already kind of said most of my final thoughts here, where I think this is a wonderful world, wonderful character arc, not executed in the way that I think is the best. And the battle system I actually think is really good. It didn't grab me, but it wasn't like I didn't hate it, just to be clear. I think I've criticized it a little bit too harshly on this episode. I actually enjoyed it for the most part. It just didn't wow me like it did other people. I was just kind of like, oh, it's here. It's fine. But overall, I'm happy I played this game. I'm bummed that it ramps up in difficulty a little bit too much at the end and that's what kind of like ultimately I was like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. But overall, I it's a gutsy sequel, and they take a lot of big swings, and as I've said before in other episodes, I admire when a game takes a big swing, and they take some big swings, and honestly, a lot of it pays off. It just sucks at the stuff that doesn't, i.e. how they end the story really doesn't. But that's kind of my final thoughts. Over to you, Rick. Your final thoughts on Final Fantasy X-2.
Well, like you, I kind of got all of mine out of the way as well. I think this is a really philosophically logical conclusion to 10. I think that this is similar to why I like, works by David Foster Wallace and Dostoevsky. They're very personal. They are about human behaviors and experiences. This is, it's a very personal story that is about friendship. It's about learning to be comfortable with oneself. It's not, a grand political thing like Xenogears. And that's okay. If you approach it for what it is, a fun, campy, Saturday morning kind of anime that is a personal story kind of first and foremost, I think you'll have a lot of fun. As long as you can, I don't want to say tamper your expectations, because one, it's temper, not tamper, and two, that's not even the phrase that I'm looking for. If you meet the game where it's at, if you go in not expecting something that it never promised to be, then I think a good time is in your grasp. And if for nothing else, you can hear that banger of a soundtrack.
Hmm. Fantastic soundtrack indeed. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you once again to my patrons who voted for this game for us to talk about. I really enjoyed this conversation, Rick. So also a huge thank you to you for setting aside so much time for this. As per usual, though, for all my guests, where can the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote?
Absolutely. You can find us online anywhere, Pixel Project Radio. That is the narrative analysis podcast that we do on video games. Anywhere you get your shows. If you want to listen to some with Josh, he was on most recently the 3-part series that we did on Outer Wilds, which, if I may say, and I must say it, probably among the best work that I've done on the show. In no small part thanks to you, of course, Josh. Easily some of the best episodes of the show, I think. There's also the Final Fantasy X-2 episode if you want to hear something that I wrote. It's okay. It's fine. And again, you can find that anywhere. I'd be remiss not to say, Josh, you were also on the Celeste episode, which was also very, very fun to talk about. Fun is maybe not the right word. It was enriching to talk about. But yes, you can find that anywhere you get your shows.
Well, I obviously wholeheartedly endorse Pixel Project Radio, not only because I've been on it, but also it is a fantastic podcast. And I've told you this off mic, Rick, and I'll tell you it on mic. I respect the shit out of what you do. Let me say it in a more elegant way. I respect what you do over there. I really wish I was as articulate as you in how you break down games. I look to you I'm inspired by how you do that. I should say I look up to you in that aspect. So I always enjoy listening to your podcast for that. So please go check out Pixel Project Radio. It's a fantastic podcast. For myself, you can follow me on mainly Blue Sky at stillloadingpodcast.com. Over there, I'm on Instagram at stillloadingpod. I'm on Twitch at stillloadingpod. Technically on Facebook at stillloadingpod, but I'm not too active over there. That's where you can find me on social media. If you want to support the show, the easiest way to do that is just give it a 5-star rating and review on whichever podcasting app you use. It doesn't cost you anything other than a little bit of time, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I like feeling warm and fuzzy. If you want bonus content, though, there is a Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you get all the episodes earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which I shouted out a bunch in this episode. This episode happened because of those patron voting rights, because my patrons voted to cover this game. So thank you once again to the patrons. And that you can do all that for only $1 a month. For $3 a month, you get everything I mentioned prior, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get all the previous tiers, plus 2 mini bonus episodes, which by the time this comes out, I want to say there will be about 90 or 91 of them out. So there's a lot of bonus content over there. And for $5 a month, you get all of that, all the previous stuff, plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which at the time we're recording this, it is a movie podcast all about the Fast and Furious movies called Still Family, where all the guests who join me aren't just friends, they're family. So if you like movie podcasts, they release monthly. And I'm tinkering with some other ideas for some extra bonus content. I told Rick a little bit off mic about one of them, and we'll see where we go from there if I have time to do it. But yeah, that's all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. And that's it. That is all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Rick, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me, my man.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.